Welcome to The Long Haul, the podcast dedicated to empowering small carriers and owner-operators to drive their business forward. I'm your host, Adam Wingfield, bringing you insights from industry leaders, real-world success stories, and strategies to help you navigate the road to profitability. Whether you're just getting started or looking to take your fleet to the next level, this is a show where trucking meets opportunity. So buckle up, it's time to go the distance. Welcome back, everybody. And today I want to talk about broker transparency because it's one of those topics where everybody thinks the answer is obvious, yet here we are still arguing about it. Small carriers feel like information is being withheld. Brokers feel like they're accused of doing wrongdoing for just doing their jobs. And then somewhere in the middle, the actual conversation gets lost. Today's episode isn't about taking sides or throwing rocks. It's about slowing this thing down and actually listening through where the tension comes from, what transparency really means, and why this issue feels personal to so many people in this industry. Today, my guest is Chris Jolly, aka the Freight Coach, someone who's lived on the brokerage side, trains brokers every day, and isn't afraid to talk about uncomfortable truths. And this is one of the ones that I really been looking forward to. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Chris.
Adam, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come on and join your show here.
Yeah, man, you've been always a big supporter. And likewise, we've always been mutual supporters. We had opportunities to sit down and break bread. So I just want the folks that are listening that may not know you to just give them a little glimpse about where Jolly came from in this whole freight world. Where did it all start?
Yeah, I come from the industry. My family's been in trucking now for almost 100 years. And when my great-grandparents immigrated here from Germany back in the 1930s, they opened a trucking company in Iowa. And my dad was an owner-operator. He drove for almost 40 years. And I got into the industry because I always wanted to work in trucking. I didn't know what a broker was, but when I graduated college and decided to get out of Wisconsin, I got hired at a freight brokerage, and I've been working as a broker now since 2011, so 15 years. I've been on this side of the industry, but I've worked in the industry, specifically for over 20 now. I was loading trucks in college and worked for a really large Wisconsin-based asset carrier back in the day as well. So my experience isn't just like siloed, and now as a business owner, my perspectives changed really on everything out there in regards to the responsibility of a freight broker and what we do to service our carriers and our customers.
The interesting thing that you put in place too is that, it's something unique that when you're born into it and when you have family into it, it has a different responsibility. It kind of feels different. It feels like you have a different tie to it. It almost feels like you have a different responsibility to make sure that you're doing it the right way. And that's one of the things that I admire about you, that you have the cat and mouse. You got the broker, you got the carrier, but you're a little different. Like you're going to keep it real. You're going to do your job, but you advocate for carriers a lot.
Yeah. I mean, you have to. Like, as a broker, I don't understand why brokers put themselves in a situation where they set their carriers up for failure. I look at it as like my drivers and the carriers that we contract with are a direct representation of myself to my customers and then to my customers' customers, right? Because you're either picking up at your customer's customer or you're delivering to your customer's customer.
Right.
I make it as seamless as possible because I've had too many sleepless nights out there, man, of like when I tried to, knowingly did the wrong thing, that I just got to that point where I think everybody does. And maybe it's just because I'm a little bit older now, Adam, where I'm like, I don't want to make this any harder on myself than I need to, like I want to give as much information out there as possible to set my carrier partners up for success.
Why do you think that, from that perspective, why do you think that when you go through, and we won't name names, but when you go through and you have the larger brokerages, why do you think they get a bad rep where it doesn't sound like what you just stated?
I think everybody goes through an iteration in their career, Adam, and this isn't just a trucking thing, where people think they know way more than they actually do because reality hasn't set in. And I think that everybody kind of goes through that phase. And then, on top of it, man, you're only as good as your training, and if your people are struggling out there in the market to build up core carriers and everything else, your training, your incentivization structure is off. And you're not really wanting that inside of your operation, because if you were, you wouldn't be going out to the load boards at the levels that some of these guys do. You wouldn't be pushing down nickel and diming carriers at the level that some of these guys do out there. And again, it's all well publicized, right? If you ever want a good stock of your company's perception in the market, just go to a couple of Facebook groups. You'll find out really quickly
100%.
how you really stand.
So what I want to do now, I want to kind of shift our focus. Today, I really wanted to really kind of dive into broker transparency, 49 CFR 371.3. And being an advocate from your perspective, and then also living on the reality of day to day on the broker side, when people say broker transparency, they're usually talking past each other. So from your perspective, what are carriers actually asking for? And this is from a broker, from sitting in the broker seat. What do you think carriers are asking for when they say, "Hey, I want to see that. I want to see those records. I want to see how much you made on this load"?
I think most brokers view it as they're wanting to look inside of their pockets on what they're making on a load. And it's one of those topics that I think that people it's grossly overstated what brokers actually make on loads compared to like what you see out there. And I think in its current state is, you know, anytime that you're struggling in business or in life, at times it's always easier to try and point the finger in a different direction, to blame external circumstances, as opposed to like looking internally and being like, hey, what can I do to clean up my operations to improve my profit margins, right? Because I look at it as, and again, I'm not here to say that people aren't gouging, because I mean, people will, right? Like that's the free market. But like on the flip side, if the opportunity presented itself, most, you know, drivers would as well, right? They would go out there,
absolutely,
money, you know. So it's like it's one of those situations where it's like you can't. From my perspective, you know, you don't want people in your books. Like that's never a good thing, you know, because that means that, you know, you're getting audited, and I don't know anybody who wants to get audited. But on top of that, I think that it's a giant game of cat and mouse, because that argument tends to go away when driver rates increase. All of a sudden that tends to go away. And then brokers go back to their rallying cry of, why don't drivers care about relationships, when they were in the last market driving down almost unsustainable rates to drivers. And then they wonder why drivers don't want to work with them when the market flips.
So like when you look at that, you know, this conversation, you talked about the conversation has been going on for years, and you talked about the conversation on the good times. You know, you don't hear about it during the bad times, you hear it now. But like, what do you think that's changed in the market now that's made transparency such a flashpoint? Because it right now we're on the cusp of just, I feel like with the litigations that you're seeing with like the C.H. Robinsons, and you're seeing the TQLs out there, you're seeing all these things that are coming up. What do you feel like is like the flashpoint that's making transparency where it is now? Why are people asking for it right now from a broker perspective?
I think people are asking for it because rates have been down for so long. I mean, like, and it's like, you look, you know, people like want to talk about a lot about like the post-COVID freight rush that was out there and how great rates were during that time, but that was such a flash in the pan. And then now rates have been down for so long, Adam, that I feel like people are like, it's got to be something more. Somebody's stealing from us. And I think that it was like, you got to think it was nothing, and then it was sky high, and then it just fell off a cliff almost overnight. And it leaves you kind of scratching like, well, wait a second. And I think a lot of people are experiencing this right now, Adam, where in December, when weather events and everything else were going on and tender rejections were up and rates were starting to increase, people were like, well, wait a second, where's all this margin? Where's all this money coming from now? What do you mean you can pay $2,000 when a week ago you could only pay $1,200? Like, where's all this coming from? And what people tend to fail to realize is brokers do lose money on loads, and they do what they got to do at times to service their customers. Now, not all the time. You know, they might be going back. I will only speak for myself. Yeah. But they might be going back to their customer and trying to get more money in that situation. But I know with where the market is right now, customers aren't paying much more at all, like for anything. So I think it grossly misunderstood on like, oh, if they're all of a sudden paying $800 more, then that was all that margin that they had in the load. They must have been making $1,000 a load every single time. I would just say and again, you could sit here and think that, oh, he's a broker, he's lying, all brokers are thieves and criminals. You could take everything I'm about to say from that standpoint. That's your prerogative. But if you go out there and research all the publicly traded data that is out there from all the publicly traded freight brokerages, all of their financials are released, okay? And you can see all of their margin percentages out there. And if you look at that, the largest brokers that are out there, it's all public data on where their margins are sitting right now. And if that's where their margins are, I don't have some secret sauce that I'm making 40% on loads when the industry is averaging, I think the last time I checked, and again, I could be wrong, around 10% for dry vans at that time from the publicly traded companies. And if that's where they're at, I would argue that the smaller companies are probably making less than that.
So how do you feel about and it's funny that you say that because you always going to hear that you have, you talked about supply and demand, you talked about things that are impacting it, right? So you mentioned something that was really, really unique. And I don't think a lot of small carriers and owner operators really, really understand. Like you just said, hey, there's going to be loads that I lose money in. But I'm going to paint a picture for an owner operator or a small carrier that doesn't understand what cost that you have associated with it. They think it's just a laptop, a load board subscription. Like you don't have a truck payment. You don't have insurance. You don't have a trailer payment. You're not paying for diesel fuel. I lose money when I move my truck and it's below a break even. How does a broker, and this is for you to explain, how does a broker lose money on a load?
So I will lose my money. I'll lose money on a load. I've had a couple of, and I don't talk publicly about a lot of this stuff, Adam, because it's just the cost of doing business to me, right? Like I'm going to win some, I'm going to lose some. I got to take care of my customer at the end of the day. But there is times where, here's what happened. We were moving a load out of Las Vegas going into Colorado a couple weeks back when that snowstorm hit out there. It was like a no fail. We got to get this picked up situation, right? Like the shipper, it was just one of those ones. And we had quoted this load 60 days ago. I wasn't expecting a freak snowstorm to hit at the receiver where it was going to deter that. But guess what? I ended up losing, I think it was close to $500 on that one to go get it picked up because my customer needed me to do it, right? And again, my carrier, we paid him I ended up losing more than that because we ended up paying detention on the load and everything else because there was a hold up at the shipper. Yeah. There's a bunch of stuff that happened, right? And it's I lost money on that transaction. I lose money on other transactions that are out there. And, it's my responsibility though, because I'm not going to go back to my customer and be like, hey, FYI, I got to service them because there's 75 other freight brokers calling my customer every single week wanting my spot. And there are people out there who will take short-term losses to reap the long-term
gain. Sure.
Just like drivers who take freight into a specific market because they get X amount of dollars going in and they know it's going to be less coming out, but they got their money on one way. So they're going to, do what they got to do to get their truck repositioned on the back end, right? But it's there's other things where I don't believe in knowingly bidding on freight at a loss, and I think that's what people see is as they're out there and they're certain brokers are posting loads for $1.10 a mile or $1.20 a mile out there. I don't personally, I know that there are certain companies that are very, very, very heavily funded that can afford to bid cheap, to take a loss and to suffocate the competition, which is just cutthroat capitalism 101. You can sustain the loss over a month
and that's
period.
Capitalism. That's what it is.
There's situations like that. Or you know what? There's times when we're delivering a load. There's a redelivery that's out there. Again, I don't nickel and dime my customer. I might have made a little bit less on that load. I'm going to pay the driver on that, and I'm just going to eat that loss, right? Because that's just the cost of doing the right thing out there in the market. There's just other times where you are going in there. And again, I do open deck and heavy haul. A lot of my freight is project months in advance bidding, right? Sometimes that's off. And again, I'm not going to go back to that time because if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm gonna lick my wounds and I'm gonna move on and just do the right thing in that instance. There's, but I think a lot of it is depending on the strategy of the leadership of some of these companies, some of them might be going in cheap. They're trying to drive down those rates, and they're trying to just find that person who will take it for that, right? Because like, again, just because you're going to move it for 1,500 doesn't mean you can't find somebody who will do it for 13 or 12. What if that other carrier is going to take it for 12 who's been sitting empty for 3 days, right? So again, that is just the way the free market operates.
You've always been an advocate of just the freedom of being able to make the right decisions. And also you're an advocate for capitalism and ensuring that, hey, it's an open market, it's free market, it's fair game to everybody. And you talked about, hey, just because one carrier's got it for 14, another carrier might be able to take it for 11, another carrier might be able to take it for 1,000. Small carriers usually don't wake up with wanting to distrust brokers unless, you got the small carriers that go to social media and that's the first thing that they see and that's the behavior that they learn. It's usually learned, right? So in your experience, where does the trust break first? Where does it start with that break of trust?
The first time you lie to a carrier, if you knowingly know that that the shipment weighs 42,000 pounds, but like you tell them it's 40,000 pounds, or, you say it picks up in Atlanta, but it actually picks in Kennesaw and you don't tell them or something like that. It's just like those little things like that, right?
Yeah.
Or like, I just look at it as if you're going to lie to somebody about small stuff, you're lying to them about a lot of stuff. And I feel like the older you get in life, the more you realize that it's like, man, if you're going to lie to me about this shipment being 27,000 pounds and it comes in at 40, what else are you lying to me about? And I just think that that's where the trust starts to break, right? Just like when I'm out there developing business, when I'm out there cold calling people, Adam, when they ask me, why are you calling? This is 100% a sales call. I'm not going to lie.
Straight up.
Yeah.
Straight up.
I'm just at a point in my business with everything, Adam. I would rather lose business for telling the truth than keep it on a lie, Mm-hmm. And I just look at it as a lot of brokers cause a lot of issues themselves, right? Like where, again, if it's truly a first come, first serve, tell them it's a first come, first serve. It's 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., no detention. Okay. Like that, you give them a choice, right? And I think like that's where drivers will start to distrust brokers is they feel like you lied to me to get me in here. Now, what else are you lying about? Are you even going to pay me? Does this even have a delivery appointment? And I think it's just those small things like that, right? Like, yes, when we're out there and we have to post loads, Adam, I'm going to post the nearest big city, but the first thing I'm going to tell them is, hey, this picks up 47 miles from here in this city. Are you okay with that? Boom. Mm-hmm. They know about it, right? So it's just one of those things where I feel like if you're going to do certain things, just, I don't know. To me, it's as simple as this. Just tell the truth. If it weighs 43,500, tell them it's 43,000, not 42, not even 42.7. Just tell them,
But you just said something too that, you think from a carrier perspective, they're like, well, if the broker knows that it's 47 miles away from the city, why post it in 47 miles away from the city? Why not post it in, the town of Dalton versus Atlanta? Like, why not do that?
I think because people, when they're scouring load boards, Adam, looking for freight, they're not looking for the city.
There you go.
They're looking for Knoxville. They're looking for Charlotte. They're not looking for Mooresville. You know what I mean? Like they're looking for that. And it's just more recognizable that it's out there.
Yeah, let's be honest. There's a line that brokers won't cross when it comes to transparency. Where do you think that line is, and why does it exist?
In what regards to transparency?
And just transparency, information transparency. Like, hey, you just said it. Like, okay, cool. I know it's going to be 47 miles away, but I'm doing this because it's easier recognizable. Maybe perhaps I'm going to get a few more calls. I want to make sure that I have enough options. A carrier can look at it from a perspective of maybe they're just doing that so they can get as many calls as they possibly can. So that way they can drive and suppress the rate down based on competition. So from a transparency perspective, and you talked about it, you said, hey, you know what? I'm going to put it in the information that it's 47 miles away, but I'm going to go ahead and post it 47 miles away from there. So where's that line draw for you?
For me, it's as long as when I send the rate confirmation over, they're aware of everything that's on there. There's no surprises. I think that's kind of the line with it.
Yeah.
And I've just found that, from my perspective, when we're booking freight and when we're building partnerships, long-term partnerships with carriers, they only need to see it that one time, right? And if it's fast loading, fast offloading, they're out there. They're like, no, we want that freight,
Yeah.
I can see why somebody would say, why don't you just post it out of that city? But I also look at it is the amount of times that we've called a carrier who's posting in Ontario, California. Actually, my truck's up in Fresno. Well, why are you posting it out of Ontario then if your truck's in Fresno? So it's like there's so many tit for tat things out there, Adam, like that. But that I feel like whatever you got to do to hook somebody to get their attention, as long as they're aware of everything as you're breaking it down, that when you receive that rate confirmation and bill of lading, we're on the same page. I have found in my career that sets up an honest transaction at that point, because I didn't slip anything after the fact. I didn't be like, oh, hey, actually the shipper's changing this to this or that to that. It's like, no, this is what it is. Kind of take it or leave it situation. As long as you're aware of it, we're on the same page.
And I get it, and it's business, right? I totally understand that. And I think that the biggest thing from a carrier perspective is you mentioned it, is like everything, especially with a broker, because the line is so thin when it comes down to trust with a broker. Yeah. It's very thin. It's like, you could sit there and tell me it's 45,000 pounds and it's 45,500. And I'm like, nah, it's not what you told me. I need another extra $1,000 for this just to move this 500 pounds. And it's like a really, really, really thin line when it comes down to it. And you said, okay, it's always going to be this tit for tat, right? So it's that tit for tat that really kind of goes back and forth with it. I just wonder if there's ever going to be a time where there's something that can just be whether it's a tit for tat breaker. I just wonder if there's ever just going to be a time that we break the tit for tat.
I don't know. And I say, I have hope that could happen, Adam, but I just think that there are always going to be people out there who want to blame everybody else for why something's going wrong.
Always.
That debate will probably always be prevalent in this industry. Even if, say they had broker transparency, right? Like say they, everything was documented. It was a clean, this broker made 12% on this load. Is that going to be enough? Or is it going to turn into, you only deserve 8%? You don't only deserve 7%. What is that line that comes along with it? And I just have found that I don't know if the tit for tat is ever going to go away. I honestly don't know. Because getting involved in social media when I did back in 2020, and it's only gotten worse. It's gotten
I can agree. Way
worse on social media. But in the real world, when I'm booking freight, when I'm actually operating, because, although I am a pretty face, I'm not just a pretty face. I actually move freight day in and day out. I practice what I preach out there. Yeah. I don't deal with this stuff with my carriers that we work with, that in tight freight markets like Colorado, they get first right of refusal, and I got their trucks booked out before they even arrive in there because they're aware of this freight 3 days in advance. We're paying them above market. I could easily go out there and try and find something for less, Adam, but I'm not going to roll the dice with my customers to try and make an extra $50. So it's I think that it's all in the eyes of the beholder. And I think that the people, the real players that are out there, they understand that, it's not always going to be sunshine and gumdrops, but as long as there's a mutual respect for the service that you're providing to each other, I think that a lot of it tends to go away at that time. But again, a lot of people like to voice their opinions on social media for everything right now. So,
man, listen, you made a statement just a few minutes ago that really just I can't tell you how true it is. Social media has made it's almost like it's painted a picture of a world that almost doesn't even exist. It's just crazy. I'm on X, I'm on all of your social media platforms, and they all have different. It's like a restaurant. They all have a different vibe. When you go into a social media platform, they all have a different vibe. And I always find it just so not only cringe, but it's just so crazy that, you have somebody that, maybe a politician or a leader within an organization, a CEO of a company, and it's just getting added by people that, just, and the insults and all that. Well, that's a totally different discussion. But to your point, to me, it has made the cat and mouse game within brokers and carriers, I think it's made it worse. I think it's made it a little bit worse. And I think that that's one of the issues is that I don't know if it's making it worse to make it better. I don't know if that's what the end result's going to be. I think it's forcing its transparency, not just in the CFR, 49th CFR, but I think it's forced transparency just in like conversation just like this. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like if you're going to say it's 40,000 pounds, damn it, it needs to be 40,000 pounds. If you say you want me to pick up in Atlanta, man, it better be within 285. So it's like it's just, if not, then I'm going to call you out on social media. I'm going to say, I'm going to tag, Chris Jolly had me pick this load up in Miami. He said it was in Miami, and man, I'm in Fort Pierce. Like, it's like, you get what I'm saying? It's like, now it's different, because now I think that because social media in the way that it is, I think it gives a false sense of accountability, whether we like it or not.
I think it gives a false validation out there that your opinion is actually more important than it really is.
Say that again. Say that
dude,
again.
It gives you false validation that makes you think that you're actually important out there because you're complaining on social media, but you're only appealing to a small subset of the population. Because I always look at it like this, and and this is why I call out brokers as well, because like, man, you made your bed here. Why are you putting a freight guard on a carrier for not picking up a load when you didn't double check to verify that they received the rate confirmation when you sent it over?
Yeah.
Or you never called and just verified any details at all, and that's the driver's fault?
Yeah.
Like, how many times has a driver been told, yeah, we're going to tender it over, and then they never receive a rate confirmation?
Get the rate con. Yeah.
Then they go out and find another load to do what's best for their business, right? So again, I think that it's just so much back and forth that goes on out there, because there's very few people that I think actually want to make things better, because it's really hard for them to get traction out there in any of the algorithms, because like, that's boring content, right? Why would anybody want to pay attention to somebody who's laying out a 10-step process on how you can actually make money in trucking, that's not trying to charge you for a course, and they own a real business, right?
Yeah.
That gets crushed in the algorithm by, can you believe this carrier did this? Blah, 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 blah. And that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's almost like, man, and I want to get your opinion on this too, because it's like, you talk about information, you could put out, the stats, facts, things of that nature, 3-step, 4-step process, make your business better. But what's more sexy is to see a truck doing a U-turn or an accident or seeing something about immigration in terms of, oh, this guy right here. I tell you, you could put an English proficiency examination roadside on X right now, and it'll probably get 1 million views. If you put the 5-step process to success, let's just say it's guaranteed, it'll get 105 views. But I think that kind of brings me to that point that you made earlier. Like, social media is really truly starting to be that false reality where, number one, like Mike Tyson said, social media, obviously it gives people the freedom and the abilities to say what they want to say and insult people without getting punched in the face. But I think also too, man, social media is it's something, man. It's to me too, man, it's driven a wedge between people. And it's made me, and I'm not talking about me, I'm just being general, because I don't know how these algorithms are designed and what the long-term vision of them, but it's made me hate you without knowing you, without me and digging into you. And it's put me in a box because the algorithm said I should.
Yeah. That's pretty much it, man. That's how it seems out there. It's a lot easier to keep people arguing. And again, like, I just think, I think of it like this. Like, I reached a point in my life and where I was like, man, I'm the only constant in every equation of my life. And if things aren't looking the way that I want them to, I got to blame myself. I got to
blame yourself, man.
And because it's like, dude, we can argue till we're blue in the face on broker transparency and this and that and going back on the tit for tat. But eventually it's your note that gets called from the bank. It's you got to look the people that you care about the most in the eyes and say, well, we're not making it. And here's why. And then you're going to sit back and you're going to look and you're going to be like, what could I have done differently? And if your first instinct is the market or whoever is in office or that politician or that person said this thing, man, you shouldn't be in business. All right.
That's the easy thing though. But it's easy to do that though.
No, I know, right? It's always easy to sit back and blame other people. But dude, I just look at it as, even if you fundamentally look at broker transparency, I want carriers and drivers to ask themselves this: when's the last time you sought out a broker to find freight for you on your behalf?
Yeah.
Because when this law was written back in 1978, I think, or when it was published into law in like the 1980s.
It was in the 80s. Yeah, it was in the Motor Carrier Act of the 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. Carriers were hiring brokers to find freight on their behalf. They should probably be asking themselves right now, who are they hiring on their behalf in today's day and age to find freight? Is it a broker or is it a dispatch service? So I look at it as one of those things, man, where the verbiage that's how kind of I perceive it, right? Where it's like, if we're going to look at the transaction between a carrier and a broker, I think it's different than how it was originally written.
So how do you feel that as we go through the broker transparency message, there was proposed rulemaking that was put in place. And part of that proposed rulemaking was to require brokers to provide transaction data and records automatically upon request of the carrier. Like, what does that do to a relationship from a carrier and a broker perspective? I was like, hey, Chris, how much you made on that load, man? I know we cool and all, but how much you make on that load? Well, what do you think that would do to the relationship?
I think in today's day and age, Adam, with where things are, I think it does not matter what a broker says. Somebody's going to think they're making too much money on the load.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Even if I went in and showed, like, the times that I lose money on freight, say that carrier requested that record in that moment and I showed that, hey, I lost $900 on this. Are they going to believe me or are they going to accuse me of falsifying my records at that point? I think people have a hard time understanding that there's a whole other side of this equation that goes on out there. Brokers as well, right? Like, brokers think like, oh, if you can't do this, you're clearly just a crappy operator. That's not the case, man. Like, this isn't easy going out on your own and being self-employed in any capacity, whether you're buying trucks, becoming a broker, a manufacturer of widgets, whatever that looks like. Yeah. This is the most competitive space that there is. There's a reason why entrepreneurship has a 90-some% failure rate within the first 6 months. And I saw a stat once, Adam, that less than 9% of businesses gross more than $1 million a year in revenue ever. Think about
crazy.
And that's not just trucking. That's all entrepreneurship.
So, that's crazy. And that's one of the stats that, it's been that same way for forever. But when you have the conversation about transparency and then you saying, hey, listen, I'm being honest with you. The records are out there, but that's not going to fix your problem. What I got in the bank is not going to fix your problem on whether or not what I'm doing. But what would you say to those that say, but look at the TQL ice cream load? Aha, that's a prime example. You're falsifying. What do you say about people that will say that, you're lying? Look what TQL did. Here's the ice cream load to prove it.
I think that if they were charging that much and they were making that much of a margin on a load, I don't know how long. It might have been a one-time thing. They might have got a rate increase out there and they flew let's just see what somebody will take it for post out there to see who'd come in and snag it.
And
but and that's the thing, right? And I guess that's always my counter, no matter what. It's like, you don't need to go to a broker to get freight. You can get those direct relationships yourself and you can work a broker out of the equation entirely. Again, I'm not justifying what certain brokers do out there in the market that's been publicized and published and everything else that comes along with that. Brokers have a reputation for a reason at the end of the day, like stereotypes exist for brokers for a reason, right? I don't think carriers just woke up one day and just started, maliciously accusing brokers of fraud and doing all of this stuff. I think that it just comes a point in time that you kind of just start feeling like the odds are just continuing to be stacked against you. You might be missing a payment here or there with your lender on your equipment and everything else, and then you catch wind that, well, wait a second, why'd you make 40% on this load? But you didn't see when they lost 40% on a load, So I think there's just two sides of the equation. And I think looking at everything on a singular transaction basis, I think is very, very short-sighted. Because if you stretch it out overall across the year, I would be hard-pressed to see people making that much consistently.
On every load. Every ice cream load's coming out.
Every ice cream load. There's just too much. Imagine this, man. Because again, we're using the largest brokers that are out there. If anybody in the industry catches wind that's what it takes 5 seconds to find ice cream shipper Cincinnati, Ohio, right?
Yeah,
There's
you
only
know,
a
yeah,
finite amount of shippers.
that's
I'm
right.
calling all of them. Hey, are you shipping to Des Moines?
Yeah,
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 I can do it for $1,200.
yeah.
I am hammering that at that time, right? So it's only a matter of time. Again, I'm not saying that there isn't a small window or a sliver of opening that they do maybe make a little bit of money on it, but it's not going to last for long, man.
You know, I think too, man, when as you talk about regulation, when it comes down to it, some people think that transparency with this particular administration can be enforced through regulation. And then based on how freight actually moves, do you think regulation would actually fix the issue, or do you think it'll just create new problems?
I think everybody should think of Ronald Reagan's famous line. The worst thing you can hear is we're the government and we're here to help.
Yeah, we're here to help, right? Yeah.
The last thing anybody wants is somebody to come in and say, you can only make so much. Because I would just argue that there are certain groups out there that say that becomes a thing. And now all of a sudden brokers are capped at 8%, which that's not capitalism or an open market at all. That is a completely different structure of the government. So I could never see that becoming a possibility. But to entertain, let's say that happens. Do you think that there is not going to be a group of people who are going to set you and have you have a ceiling? Because if you're going to set somebody's ceiling, people are going to go find your ceiling. Now all of a sudden you can only make $2 a mile. That's it. That's the max. Government says you can only make $2 a mile now. What if your break-even point is $2.10 a mile? You're banking.
You're out of business. Right? You're out of business.
Really?
But you know, but then you'll have those that argue, say, well, what about real estate agents? They're capped in their commissions. Why can't brokers and freight be capped at the same thing?
To the best, to the best of my knowledge, real estate, is it a state by state thing that's out there, Adam, or is it just like kind of like an industry? It's like
they have a standard. They have a standard percentage that they stay. So you have a seller. You obviously the selling agent, listing agent. They're going to have their commissions within it, but it's capped at a certain percentage. And then you sell a house, then this broker knows exactly what commission he's going to get. There's going to be no negotiation on commission. This is what the company's going to write the check for. So then you're going to have those people that's going to argue about, I don't know, I think it was like 3% or 4% on the seller. It's been a while. But, and I could be wrong. If there's any real estate agents in the comments, just drop it in the comments. But what do you think about, they say, well, if you could do it in real estate, you should be able to do it in trucking.
Mm-hmm. I look at it as it'll probably boil. So I would assume that the real estate agent is paying for their own marketing.
100%. Yeah.
Right. So they're putting a financial risk out there. I would say the same thing applies to freight brokers out there, right? Like I invest in travel, I invest in marketing, I invest in trying to get in front of people. And, I have overhead for my business as well. Again, I don't see how that would solve your business from becoming profitable. Like a cap commission is, and I would have to do a lot more real estate research to like accurately formulate an opinion to draw some parallels between the two. But I just look at it is that capping? I just don't believe in capping anything. Just like I want truckers to make more money on a load, right? Like I don't want them to ever be you're capped at $2 a mile. I don't think people actually want that. I just think that they do when they think that all is lost for themselves. And, again, if somebody could show me a system and how that would work, Adam, in there, I would love to see how, like, the actual parallels and not the emotional brokers make too much money. You should cap your stuff.
I think that too. It's easy to get into the emotional brokers. They should cap their money because there's greed that plays a part in that too on both sides. You said there's carrier markets that absolutely rip. There's broker markets that actually rip too. So there's always going to have that on both sides. But if you can force brokers to understand one thing about small carriers that they consistently miss, and you do this all the time, a la the freight coach, what would it be? What would be that one thing that hey, listen, brokers, and you can't say relationships because we've been talking about that forever, and they're not doing good at that. Obviously, that's not something that they're doing good at, and they're not getting better at that. I can just kind of see that as we go along. But what would be that thing that you think that brokers should understand about small carriers that they consistently mess up time after time after time after time?
I think that brokers need to take the approach that your carriers are your customer as well. Doesn't matter that I pay them. I want to set them up for success. I want us to both be on the exact same page no matter what. I don't want them rolling up to my shipper or my receiver feeling a certain type of way that maybe they spout off to somebody at a
Yeah.
facility and it costs me business. I think that a lot of brokers, unfortunately, talk down to carriers as they're subhuman. And that's one thing that I wish most people like. This isn't even just like a trucking thing, man. It's just society in general these days, right? Like that is a human being on the other end of the phone.
Yeah.
You know, like talk to them with a little bit of dignity, treat them with a little bit of respect, but set them up for success. Like, is that going to hurt your business? No, I would argue until I die that the more you set your carriers up for success as a broker, the more successful your brokerage will be.
So are you for or against the way that the rule is now? Are you for the financial records being released to the carrier, or do you believe that that would cause a disruption in the market that could potentially cause further issues?
I don't know if it would cause as much of a disruption as people would think, because ultimately the shippers are the ones signing the checks, and the shippers could be like, I don't care what they make on the load. Like their on-time percentage is 99.9%. Their communication is flawless. We do not care. I honestly think that is probably what it would boil down to in that moment. Am I a fan? I would say that the way that the law is written in today's present tense, my big challenge to that is that how the transaction is currently operating under? And if the answer is no, then are you entitled to those records? That's my thing, where it's like, I like to play by the law, like if as much as possible.
For sure.
I want to play by, but like, I just kind of look at it like that, like the way that it is, like the way it was written and the way that it is in its current tense, I do not think is applicable to how the transaction currently operates from. I'm not trying to side skirt anything. I'm not a fan of it as a whole, because again, I think the more and more this stuff is pushed, the less and less money everybody will make.
I think too, man. I think you said it before. Everybody's looking for a smoking gun, something that we can say, hey, aha, I guarantee if they fix this, that's going to fix the industry. You see a lot of times on social media, people are going up to, truckers at truck stops like, hey, what's one things that we need to fix about the industry? And it's always going to be the B word, brokers, 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 brokers. And, I think ultimately you're always going to hear that in a down market, but then you also heard in the down market something else that came out in recently, which is really just took the social media algorithms by storm, and it's the non-domicile ELP, the whole immigration in regards to the industry. And I recently had Jorge Garcia, who was the trucker that went and sued the FMCSA, ended up winning a stay in regards to the non-domicile CDL process, because there's so many things that go behind that. From your opinion, and me just knowing the backstory upon you, and you don't have to go into it, but me knowing about that, from your opinion, do you believe that is that another one of those smoking gun type moments that, or do you believe that a broker should be more inclined to make sure that they know that they're not, they're not tendering business to a non-domicile carrier or a carrier that doesn't speak English?
I look at it for like my honest opinion is like I've broken this down on my show extensively, like almost ad nauseum at this point, because it seems like it just keeps popping up out there. I think that my stance is, and I've said this publicly numerous times, as long as they're following the law and the rules, that should be all of everybody's concern, right? Whether if they have the proper visa and then they fall under a non-domiciled category because of that, but they filed the right visa paperwork, and as long as they're paying taxes and held to the exact same standards that I am, I think that's a counter argument. You're talking about the work visa as opposed to the non-domiciled CDL. I think it's two completely separate issues that are out there. I want to make sure that everybody who is driving a semi down the road can accurately read and speak the language. I don't think that that's too much to ask that is out there. But again, I've been doing this for a very long time.
Yeah.
It is a small percentage of the drivers that are out there
Very
that
small.
are completely illiterate
Very
to that,
small.
right? And to be honest with you, I haven't seen that in like about 5+ years to the point where I'm like, this person cannot do that at all. Like they can't even understand what I'm saying. But again, like, and then you pull it further back. Data is data. All right. Everybody wants to say trust this and trust the data. The data specifically says all crashes that are on record do not notate whether the driver was non-domiciled or not. So therefore, how can you say that they increased to that? Again, if we're calling balls and strikes, which you have to call balls and strikes, all right, that is not a real thing. And then plus, furthermore, the non-domiciled CDLs that are out there, what was it 200,000 in existence?
Yeah.
So again, that is a different argument than removing people who have falsified their documentations, who have overstayed their visas, who don't even have a valid CDL. That's a different argument than a non-domiciled CDL. If they have a non-domiciled CDL, they filed the proper paperwork, they have the right visa, they are paying their taxes, they have a legal business entity, they should be fine, in my opinion, because they're following the laws. If you want to change the laws, lobby in DC and change it that way. But the people out there who have the under the table CDLs, who are 75 MCs, who are blatantly committing fraud, they need to be punished to the full extent of the law to deter anybody from doing that, because they are putting hardworking Americans out of work. No matter how you want to spin it, they are putting hardworking Americans out of work.
But what would you say that, and you made a great point. What would you say that those people, because obviously the algorithm, we talked about it earlier in the show, the algorithm on the social media platforms, they put that out there. What would you say about those people who will challenge what you just said in terms of, a broker should be held liable 100% if they use a driver that has a non-domicile CDL, or if they use a driver that may have had issues with ELP violations before. If the freight coach uses a driver that's a non-domicile CDL holder, the argument will also be, well, why didn't he use just an American driver instead? Why did he just make the decision to use that non-domicile CDL holder as his choice? And that's where it comes from a regulatory, not regulatory, but an inflammatory perspective on social media. What would you say about that?
I would say this. The FMCSA is the governing body that is the pass-fail basis of carriers, right?
Yep.
To the best of my 100%. Knowledge, that's how.
100%. That's the rule.
If the FMCSA says ABC Trucking is a valid carrier, then if they're valid in the eyes of the FMCSA, why aren't they valid in the eyes of my business, right? Because I am supposed to be relying on the FMCSA to provide me that data and that information that is out there, right?
Sure.
So if that's the case, then is this an FMCSA issue or is this a broker issue? And then furthermore, if I select a carrier to do a load and something happens in transit, is it my fault or is it the driver's fault? Was I behind the wheel or was the driver behind the wheel in that moment?
There you go. And
that's that's kind of my stance on that, because I know that there's a couple of cases I think that are at the Supreme Court level now regarding the broker liability in regards to the carrier selection. And it's like, again, if I go to the FMCSA or if I use a carrier onboarding service who is plugged into the FMCSA and I have a green light, I can book them. Mm-hmm. And then something happens in transit where it turns out they were using fraudulent care, like whatever. How is that on me if the data from the FMCSA at the time of booking said they were else. Green light, right? But if I knowingly was doing that, there's a difference, right? That's a pattern of negligence at that point, right? Like I'm choosing to be like, no, they don't have active insurance, but let's roll the dice, right?
Yeah,
I need to make money on this load, or the carrier's MC is tied to multiple business entities or multiple ELP violations. Let's push it through. They're good guys. Like that is negligence at that point. But if I can prove everything that I did in that carrier selection was in accordance to the rules of the FMCSA. And if the FMCSA says green light, and then in transit, the driver gets stopped by the DOT and they put them out of service, why did the FMCSA allow them to operate at that time?
You know what that kind of reminds me of too is that, so like this weekend, I saw a tweet this weekend that it just made me laugh to the extent of where we're at, from social media. So, there was a big snowstorm down in North Carolina, historical, last 22 years, haven't seen anything like that, right? So there was a car that they showed that they got stuck somewhere on the interstate, and apparently the first responders couldn't get back to them. There was over 750 accidents in one day, the whole nine. But you know who got blamed for that? The governor of North Carolina. So the governor of North Carolina got blamed for that motorist for being stranded in the snow after the governor of North Carolina went in and said, hey, look, there's a massive snowstorm that's taking place. Stay off our highways. Give the first responders the opportunity to do their jobs. But then the motorist said, I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to go out here and I'm going to do my thing. Then he got stuck. And then we said, oh, the governor abandoned such and such. And I think it was something that, I don't know the guy's name. I think it's Nick Sortor or something like that. A huge social media person that's got, millions of followers. But the amplification of that and I say all that to say it's kind of almost the same thing along those lines where the blame is being placed not on the actual person, not on the actual, the root cause of the problem, but in that case, the blame goes to the broker because you've done all the things that you're supposed to do. You've already said, hey, this is my veteran qualifications. This is what the FMCSA said. Hey, you went through the RMIS program. Everything went fine. You checked all my boxes. You're good to go. But then if something happens, then you're the one that's expected to hold the liability. And that's what the interesting thing is about where we're at as far as where I think social media has taken the relationships from. It's just putting us in a crazy place. Now, let me flip it a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you think the hardest truth carriers don't want to hear about a broker? They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. It's la, 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 la. You're a broker. I don't want to hear it. I don't care.
I think that we face challenges as well in business. I think that the hard truth that a lot of drivers don't want to hear is that we know we have overhead, we have bills to pay too, we have investments. The majority of the ones who are insured, like we have expenses, we have break-even points on shipments as well. But I think that they just think that brokers just have access to all of this freight and that there's no competition out there, and that there's not people out there pining for our spots at any given moment. I also look at it as not, and I think once you get people out of the echo chamber of social media, they'll all admit it. Man, I got a bunch of really great brokers that I work with that keep me busy all the time, but I had that one experience 5 years ago, and now I just hate every other broker besides these three people who keep me fed and that I rely on for my business and everything else.
Yeah.
I think that it's, I think most people are posturing for social media likes than anything. And they don't want to come out and just admit, that like, no, man, my brokers that I work with are great. They pay me out. They pay me well. They keep me busy. If there's an issue, they pay me. There's a lot more brokers out there who operate ethically than not. And, another kind of to close that out, Adam, brokers aren't going anywhere. All right.
Like you can say that again.
Brokers' market share is only increasing. Okay.
But it's going to change. It might change though with AI and all these things happen. It could change. But as far as having a third party between the shipper and the carrier, I agree. I don't see brokers going anywhere.
I mean, driverless technology could replace the American truck driver too, man. There's a lot of potential threats that are out there at any given moment, right?
Yeah, sure.
But
sure.
I think no matter what, quality is always going to win.
Yeah.
And you got to look internally, before you ever look in any other direction. Because what can you do differently? And then again, brokers too, they have to say, what can I do differently to make my carriers' lives easier? You have to take it from that perspective as well.
But it's too easy to place blame. You know, we talked about it. It's too easy for me to go out on Twitter and just place blame on somebody else. It's too easy for me to not take accountability. And I honestly miss the days of social media where we were just having fun looking at news and sharing pics of your kids. But now it's like, hey, we're fighting for likes. We're fighting for shares, retweets. People out here fighting because somebody shared a video that got 1 million views and that video is supposed to belong to me. It's supposed to have a watermark on it. Like, it's getting absolutely wild out here. And I hate it because, like, I really believe that what COVID helped do, COVID treated social distancing as a foundational behavior that's only going to get worse over time. And I really see that as we're getting more and more distant as people. Because like you said earlier in the call, and it's something that I really, really hinged on that was like, you know what, he's damn right about that. But it's like, look, like if you go into a world like X or you go into a LinkedIn world and you step out here and you go out in the real world, it's not the same world, man. People don't hate each other like they do on social media. People out here, they speaking, we're having a good time, go smoke a cigar, you know, play golf. People don't hate each other like that. And I don't believe that brokers and carriers hate each other either, because you have relationships with carriers and brokers every single day that get it, that, you know, there's carriers, if you get attached to a good broker, that broker can 10x your business. Right? Because when I look at that as is that you're doing the same things. You're outsourcing your sales. You're outsourcing your load tenders. If I bring on a broker in my business, I'm outsourcing. Would you agree or disagree? I'm outsourcing, right?
I would agree. And I would also counter to every broker out there, partnering with the right carrier could and will 10x your business.
100%. 100%. Because now you can sell that capacity like like nobody's business.
Dude, the carrier partners that we have right now have pulled off miracles for my customers. Miracles. Mm-hmm. And I value everything that they do. I do not ever look at the transaction. I look at the rolling 12 months.
Yeah.
No matter. And there's going to be some times where I'm going to overpay them, but there is nothing more satisfying than my customer saying, "Thanks for sending those guys back in. They are great. Hey, that machine that we shipped out that goes to the trade show that we spent $250,000 on to put our booth in, we have a sense of ease coming in knowing that you sent the same carrier in for that load that you do for all of our stuff, for all of our trade shows." Yeah. That's worth its weight in gold, man.
You know, I think that, you know, as we're wrapping it up and if you look forward thinking and if we're having this conversation again in 5 years and it actually improved, the industry actually improved, and we look out 5 years and, you know, the sun is out, there's birds chirping. What do you think is that one thing that would change the industry to make it feel that way as we go through, I don't know, today's 2026, you look at 2031, what's going to make the birds chirp and the sun come out and all that good stuff?
Freight Coach Logistics will be a top.
There it is. There it is.
Market share, and carriers are going to be like, I want to haul for him because him and their team actually treat us right.
I love manifestation. I love manifestation.
That's what it is.
And I love that. And you know, the thing that, you know, and here it is though, man. No, to be honest with you, that goes to every single carrier that's on this call too. Like I think some folks mix what you just said. Like it starts with you. It starts with you. It starts with your vision and what you're going to make happening. You didn't say, okay, yeah, well, what's going to happen is we get rid of all of this and get rid of that. You're like, nah, man. If I get better, if I scale what I got going on, if I focus on what I'm doing, if I improve my market share, and I become the leader in this industry, the industry will change. If you want change and if you want regulations change, what do you got to do for it? You got to lobby for it. And lobbying just doesn't mean on social media. Not to say that social media doesn't hear your lobbying cries, but there's a lot more effective ways of doing it than trying to retweet accidents and things of that nature. It's like the whole sensationalism and like that's what gets people all riled up, seeing sensational things, and that's what really gets the likes. But more importantly, your business and focusing on your business. And I'm so glad that you ended with that, because ultimately, when you look in the mirror and you're able to say what you see in the mirror is truly define and change, and it starts with you, then that's how we get where we need to go.
100%, man. That's it, man. If I want the world to change, I got to change. I got to be better.
There it is, man. I appreciate you sharing with us. And this is the reason why I wanted to have this conversation. I didn't want to inflame, but I wanted to mature it, because transparency isn't a slogan. It's not a tweet. And it's definitely not solved by pretending one side holds all the blame. If this episode made you feel a little bit uncomfortable, you disagree with it, that's probably a good thing, because the only way the industry gets better is by having honest conversations and not just louder ones that get more likes and reshares. If you got value from this, please like, share, subscribe. Make sure you signed up for our newsletter. We break down these issues every single week without any fluff. Chris, my man, I appreciate you coming on and keeping it real as always, my dude.
Appreciate the invite, man. Thank you so much, Adam.
All right, everybody, that wraps up another episode of The Long Haul. Do me a favor, make sure that you tap in next week for our next episode and stay safe. Have a good one.